Okay, final segment of the show for this week is going to be talking about the two top free agents in the MLB for this upcoming offseason. That, of course, being former Yankees outfielder Juan Soto and Roki Sasaki, the Japanese phenom pitcher that's going to be coming to the MLB in 2025. So let's start with Juan Soto. So this is a young man who is 26 years old. He is a finalist for AL MVP this year, although I do feel pretty strongly that he will lose to his teammate Aaron Judge in that race, although if it was up to me, I would pick Juan Soto, but that's just because I am biased. But this is a guy who is obviously one of the best players in the not only the American League, but the entirety of the MLB, and this is a guy that is a unicorn. I talked about it a lot with Andy Riley, an hour kind of interview session where we talked a lot about a whole bunch of different things in terms of the Yankees, in terms of the Dodgers, just the World Series in general. But Juan Soto is a guy that's very unique. We have not seen a kind of combination of power and on-base skill since Andy alluded to it, since a guy like Barry Bonds. I liken Juan Soto a lot more to somebody like Ted Williams, who also had really good power and also had a really good high on-base percentage and batting average as well. So I kind of liken Juan Soto more to somebody like that, especially given that they are, well, I guess Barry Bonds was a lefty too, but he was just, I feel like, a different style hitter than Juan Soto altogether. But regardless, we have not seen a combination of skills like that in a very, very long time. And normally, free agents like this, when they are really good, they don't hit free agency until they're 29, 30, 31. But Juan Soto is 26 years old because the Nationals called him up at 19 years of age to the major leagues. So that 6 and 7 year clock has already run out for Juan Soto at 26 years of age. So this is a guy who could theoretically sign a 15-year contract and it not look that nuts. Now, I think it would be nuts, but listen, if you're going to give Xander Bogaerts an 11-year contract when he's 31 years old coming into free agency, then it's all the more feasible that you should give Juan Soto a 15-year contract in order to get a guy like that. Now, this is somebody who, again, I said it in that video and I'll say it again, he could very easily command $50, even $60 million per season, and I would not bat an eye. I don't quite think he'll get up to that 60 range, but if that ending number starts in a 6, that, $600 million range, that would not shock me in the slightest. And in fact, that might be worth it. This might be the one guy in the MLB outside of Shohei Ohtani who would be worth that kind of money. Now, I personally don't think anybody's really worth that kind of money, but if everybody's shelling out that kind of money, Juan Soto is the one guy that I would pay outside of Shohei, of course. That kind of money. He's the only one with a combination of his skill set that I think won't deteriorate with age, with the actual age that he is right now, and just the attitude, right? This is a guy that, is very flamboyant, is very fun to watch. We all know the Soto shuffle and all that, all the antics and stuff like that. But this is one of the few guys that, at least I haven't heard very many negative things said about his attitude. Like, a lot of guys that kind of do stuff like that, people, the media tends to not like them, or teammates tend to not like them, or whatever it may be. I've not heard one bad thing ever said about Juan Soto. Now, maybe that's just because I'm not listening, and because I'm a bit biased, but I still haven't heard it. And so it's one of those things that I love that. I love that kind of attitude, and especially because this is a guy who's won before. He has now taken 2 teams to the World Series, and he has won one, especially given that he was a heavy underdog and was only 21 or 22 years of age when he did it. It's amazing the kind of career he's already had. He's already a champion. He's already a guy that's been in the MVP race just about every season. I love Juan Soto, so this would not shock me in the slightest if he got $600+ million, in terms of his free agency. I really wouldn't be shocked at that at all. So where do I think Juan Soto is going to end up? There's a number of places that I think have a shot. Obviously, he said he's open to all of the teams in the MLB. But let's be real. He's going to go to where they pay him the most money. Because why wouldn't he? He's 26 years old. He's already a champion. I would honestly think about doing the same thing if I was him at this point. So, you got a number of teams that I'm sure all 32 teams are going to actually, or 30 teams, not 32. Sorry, I'm still in NBA mode. I just recorded all the NBA stuff for this week. So, you know, all 30 teams are probably going to be interested in Juan Soto because why wouldn't you? Look at him. But there's only going to be a handful of teams that actually have a legitimate shot at paying him the amount of money. Now, I am going to make some kind of stretches with that and kind of say, hey, maybe he really likes this aspect of this team so much that they don't have to pay him as much money as the Dodgers or the Yankees or whoever in order to actually go there. Maybe they can get away with paying him, 10 years for 80 or something like that, and he'll go there because he likes the culture or whatever the case may be, right? I'm going to have a couple of those, but for the most part, we kind of know where all this is going. So let's start with teams that I think are less likely to sign the phenom of Juan Soto. Let's start with the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies, they have the money to do so, and so I kind of have to throw their name in the kind of hat here. They have a ton of money to kind of throw around, and they have a really, really good team. Obviously, they had the best team in the National League in terms of record outside of the Dodgers last year, and, so they are going to want to add. And in the outfield, they have some areas for improvement. Obviously, Soto can step out to left field, and, maybe Castellanos or Schwarber can kind of continue to be that DH role, and, one of them can play outfield less. Rojas can continue to roam center field, and Marsh can continue to roam left field. So, that'll kind of improve the defense, I think, if you go that route. But obviously that means what happens to Schwarber and or Castellanos because one of those guys are the odd man out. Because since Harper moved to first base, you can't move either one of those guys to first base, and they can't really play anywhere else. So what are you going to do if you are the Phillies? Do you trade Castellanos? Do you trade Schwarber? I don't know. I don't think you do. So that's kind of a not super likely, but they have the money to do so, and maybe they can work something out, so I do kind of throw their name in there. Another team that I think could do it if they wanted to, but probably will not, is the Atlanta Braves. Look, the Atlanta Braves do not spend this kind of money. That's just the way that they operate. They sign really, really cheap contracts and keep their young guys for 1 billion years for $0 because that's just what they do. And you know what? Good on them. It's really fun rebuilding them in the show, that's for sure, because you can do whatever the heck you want because you have all of the good players for like 5 or 6 years on very cheap contracts. So you could just basically do whatever you want and run roughshod over the league. It's great. But this is not the show. This is real life. And so do the Braves sit there and think, man, we've got Acuna really cheap. We've got Albies really cheap. We've got Olsen, not really cheap, but pretty decently cheap compared to some of the first baseman contracts that you're going to see. We've got Michael Harris pretty cheap. We've got Spencer Strider pretty cheap. We've got Austin Riley pretty cheap. We've got all this big core that we've brought in. Maybe we splurge on Juan Soto. Maybe we actually have him play left field instead of a guy like Jared Kelenic or Adam Duvall or somebody like that. So, do they do that? It's certainly possible, and I would honestly really like to see that. Part of me would, but I don't think it's very likely because, again, the Braves just don't really shell out that kind of money. I do think that the Braves would be very smart if they said the one guy in our history that we're going to throw money at like that is Juan Soto. I think that would make perfect sense, but I just don't think the likelihood is very high for that to happen. And the last team that I think has the money but won't probably actually sign him is the Boston Red Sox. They are rebuilding right now. They have a ton of cap space over the next handful of years, and they hopefully will start actually spending money here soon so that they can continue to improve. Now, I personally think that the way that the Red Sox need to go is throw, $15 to $20 million at 3 or 4 high-quality players to actually improve their pitching and their bullpen and just their depth overall. And I think that they should re-sign Tyler O'Neill as well. But I wouldn't be too upset if the Red Sox decided to throw $60 million a year at Juan Soto and have him just be the cornerstone of the franchise for the next decade. Yeah, I would be very happy, especially because we take him away, from the Yankees. Now, I do not think that this is very likely to happen. I think, again, the more likely scenario is going to be the Red Sox throwing a handful of money at a bunch of different players to kind of improve, including, by the way, Roki Sasaki, which I'll get to in a minute. But, you know, I just don't think that they're going to inevitably sign Juan Soto because I think they're going to not pay him as much money as some other teams are going to want to. Now, do I hope that doesn't happen? Absolutely. I would love Juan Soto on the Red Sox. That would make me a happy, happy boy. But I just, again, think it's not very likely. All right, and some reasonable contenders, but ultimately the ones that I do not think will sign him. The Baltimore Orioles. Their outfield was disappointing, to say the least, this season, and so I would not be surprised if a team that is, again, young and up and coming and has some money to spend will go out there and throw a bag at somebody like Juan Soto. Because let's face it, the Orioles have not had a lot of star power over the last decade. Ever since Adam Jones left, and by the way, it's Adam Jones, that's not a lot of high star power, they haven't really had that great of a team. In the last couple of years, they have been really good and have disappointed in the playoffs mightily. And so, last year they worked on their rotation. This year, maybe they work on their lineup and they get Juan Soto to throw in there, play right field, or be their DH, or play left field, or wherever it is, and they can trade some of those younger outfielders that are in their minor league system, and they can get some more pitching, or they can get some more bullpen pieces, or they can continue to improve their infield, whatever it is. Now, I think that that all makes sense, and I do think that that is a really good fit for Juan Soto, and I think that he would love that culture in Baltimore. However, I ultimately don't think that it will happen because I think the Orioles either, one, simply will not want to spend that kind of money on Juan Soto because they're not a super big franchise. Like, yes, they have been really successful over the last couple of years, but they don't have very much in terms of, revenue coming in as compared to bigger teams like the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Phillies or the Mets or whomever. So, I think that while it makes sense fit-wise, and if they do have the money to spend, it would make sense, I ultimately think that they will not, because I think they'll be outbid. The New York Mets are also a team that I can see Juan Soto going to. A team that, really was disappointing and has been disappointing over the last handful of seasons, but last year went on a miraculous playoff run to kind of re-solidify them in the NL East. Now, this could take Juan Soto back to the NL East, which I know he had a lot of success with the Nationals, so he's very familiar with it over there. He stays on the East Coast. He stays in the state of New York, so he doesn't really have to move from where he is right now. He just kind of moves, down the subway. And I think ultimately the reason why I am not going to do this, if I am the Mets, is because he is too much money even for the Mets. I don't think the Mets need Juan Soto where they're at right now. Now, maybe you disagree, and that's fair. But I just think that the Mets are probably going to be wiser to improve their starting rotation rather than spending $60 million or $55 million a year on Juan Soto. I think they'd be much more wise to help out that rotation. Because let's face it, as great of a year as Sean Manaea had, if he goes into 2025 as your best pitcher, you are in trouble if you're the Mets. You've got to spend some money on some pitching rather than some more offense. But we'll see. I just ultimately think it will not be the Mets, but I could totally see it. And another team that obviously makes sense, but I ultimately think will be passed up on, are the New York Yankees. Yes, I am predicting right here that Juan Soto will not re-sign with the New York Yankees. Now, obviously, everything that I've talked about in past videos and everything that I'll talk about right now are reasons why Juan Soto is a perfect fit in New York. He helped lead them to a World Series, and honestly kind of did lead them because Aaron Judge was a no-show in the playoffs for the most part. He is a perfect player for that lineup given what they have versus what they need. He gets on base. He's a lefty swinging bat. When he struggles, he still helps you win games because of his ability to take walks, get on base, and steal bases every once in a while. The rest of your lineup really doesn't have that, honestly, if you're the Yankees. So this is a guy that's very, very valuable for that lineup. Number 3, he's familiar with New York and the system and the team, and they were really, really good last year. So all these things put together mean that he is an excellent fit in a Yankee uniform. And he just feels like a Yankee at the same time, too. This is a guy that brought a lot of personality to that team. and really kind of, opened up that entire roster to, improve in other areas because they had Juan Soto that they could rely on. Now, why is he not going to re-sign with the Yankees? I honestly think the Yankees did a little bit more damage in Juan Soto's mind than what they realize. I think that World Series run is a stain in Juan Soto's mind. I think he felt like he was by himself oftentimes, and the amount of times that I saw him standing in the on-deck circle, not just in the postseason, but in the regular season as well, where he's standing in the on-deck circle and the guy before him strikes out, or the guy before him grounds out to end the game, and he never gets a chance to help them win. I think that they did some damage. Now, I very easily could see the Yankees re-signing Juan Soto. In fact, I actually think it'd be smart of Juan Soto to sign with the Yankees because his career is going to be attached to a Yankee uniform, and if he can somehow find a way to win a World Series in a Yankee uniform while he's there, he will be a legend of baseball that very few can live up to. I'm just being honest. But at the end of the day, there's one team, and I hate to say it, that's going to outbid them, and that's going to be better than the Yankees. Yep, woo, 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 you know it, guys. The team that I think Juan Soto will sign to this offseason is the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't want it to be true. I almost don't even believe myself hearing it when I say it. But let's just face it, guys. The Dodgers have basically unlimited amounts of money. They don't care. They are just hungry hippo, just gobbling up free agents like it's nobody's business. And I think that somehow, some way, they're going to scrape $70 million a year together, and they are going to sign Juan Soto. Now, I don't want this to be a thing, like I said, because that outfield would make me want to cry for the rest of time. But I just think, based on what I've seen, based on what I've heard, and just based on what I know about the Dodgers, they just won the World Series, they beat Juan Soto, and yes, I do think that Juan Soto is going to join the dark side. He's going to be one of those, if you can't beat him, join him guys. He's going to pull a Kevin Durant, and he's going to do it. I think he's going to sign with the Dodgers. It's going to be something insane. It's going to be something like, 13 or 14 years for $680 million. It's going to be ridiculous, guys. It's going to be so far out of reach of every other team that the Dodgers just laugh their way all the way to the bank. And who knows, maybe they do what they did with Shohei, where they just say, we'll pay you $1 million a year and then pay you $70 million a year for the next 15 years after you retire. Who knows, maybe they do that, but I just think it's going to be the Dodgers. Simply because team fit, it makes sense. They need some outfield help. Their outfield depth's not all that great. They're moving Mookie Betts back to the infield from what I hear. Their lineup could use some more guys that can get on base, frequently, because they don't have a ton of guys that can do that. With Will Smith struggling from a power perspective, they need a guy who could drive in more runs. And, of course, they're really, really good. So, I just think that it's going to end up being the Dodgers. Okay, moving on to Roki Sasaki. Now, this is a guy that obviously I have to catch up on some tape and watch a lot more of. Based on the numbers, this guy is pretty darn good. So, where do I think the newest Japanese phenom pitcher is going to land? Well, let's start with where I think he could land, but ultimately probably will not due to certain reasons. Now, outsider shot here, I like the Detroit Tigers. Now, why do I like the Detroit Tigers? They have a lot of cap space. They don't have a lot of big contracts on this roster, and they made a huge playoff run. So this is a fun young team that I actually think really can make a push for a guy like Sasaki. They can bring him in. They can kind of start attracting more free agents because they're going to say, hey, we're serious about competing. We think that we can compete in this division, and we are going to sign Sasaki because of that belief. I ultimately think it's not going to happen, though, because pitching is not their problem. Their pitching is actually quite good. It's actually their offense that needs a lot of help. So I think that they would be more benefited, and it would be more beneficial to them to go after some offense rather than some pitching. Now, could they sign Sasaki depending on the price tag? Absolutely. I could see it. But I just think ultimately they're going to focus on more offense rather than defense. Another team that has an outside shot, in my opinion, of signing Sasaki is the San Diego Padres. Now, why do I think that? I think that they are a pretty good team that needs some more pitching depth, and they already signed Yuki Matsui last year, so they have a history of bringing in Japanese pitchers to their roster recently. So, and of course, Yu Darvish is already there as well. So, this is something that I could very much see happening. Here is the thing about the Padres, though. I think that they're just going to end up passing on it. I think that this is a team that is trying to rebuild in other areas and get some more offense infused into this team. And so pitching, while I think, again, depending on the price tag, they could bring him in. I think there are other teams that have a more pressing need at pitcher that will end up outbidding the Padres down the road. And the third team I want to mention in this, probably not, but who knows category, is the New York Yankees. So the New York Yankees are a team that they just have a ton of money. So I kind of have to just throw them in there as a team that could and should be interested in a guy like Sasaki. They need more pitching depth. We saw it in the postseason that their pitching really let them down oftentimes. So, but again, I just think that they have more pressing needs. Keeping Juan Soto is probably going to take up all of their time and all of their energy, and so we'll see what happens. I just don't think Sasaki ends up going to the Yankees, but I can always see that happening because, one, they're the Yankees, and two, because they do need some pitching. All right, a few teams that are going to be finalists but end up just missing out on Roki Sasaki. Number one is, again, my Boston Red Sox. Now, the Red Sox need some pitching very, very badly, and so I would hope that they are going to throw a good amount of money at Sasaki. Now, why do I think Sasaki is going to not sign with the Red Sox? Because I just think he won't want to. Yeah. It's that simple. I don't know if they'll get outbid. I don't know if they, will just not be interested after a while. I actually just think that Sasaki will say no. It just seems like a scenario where he's going to go there and he's going to have way too much pressure on him. He's not going to have a lot of leeway in terms of, growth or anything like that. He's just going to go there and he's going to be the ace right away, and that's going to be it. And so, maybe he wants that. Maybe he wants to be the ace of a rebuilding team, but I just feel like Sasaki will ultimately turn them down, so I'm putting them in this category. Another team that I think will be in the running that not a lot of people are going to talk about most likely this offseason is the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, why the Brewers? Well, they were really, really good last season. It's just nobody remembers because they got annihilated in the first round of the playoffs. So, not a lot of people kind of remember, this team won like 90 games. They were one of the best teams in the National League for the entire season last year. And, crazily enough, they got rid of Corbin Burns and didn't have Brandon Woodruff last year either. So this is a team that I think can grow to improve that rotation. And with the amount of money that they have to spend, I think it would behoove them to have a three-headed monster of Freddie Peralta, Brandon Woodruff, and Roki Sasaki. I think it's actually a really, really good trio. And let's just face it, some of their young pitchers have just not really developed into guys that we thought. DL Hall, Aaron Ashby, these guys have not developed where they wanted to be. So they need some more depth in that rotation. But I do ultimately think that they will be outbid by some other teams. But I do think Milwaukee has a really good outsider shot to get somebody like Sasaki. And I would not be shocked at all if he went out there and picked a team like that. The final team that I think will barely be outbid for the services of Roki Sasaki is the Cincinnati Reds. Now, why do I think this? The Reds just need pitching. It's that simple. Hunter Green was great when he pitched last year. Nick Lodolo was great when he pitched last year, but those two guys were injured for significant portions of the year. Graham Ashcraft and Andrew Abbott were disappointments. Let's just face facts, guys. They were supposed to develop. They really didn't. And then guys like Carson Spears are not somebody that I would consider to, consider good enough to build your team around or good enough to count on in the future. And so why not go out and bring a premier Japanese free agent to this already young and exciting core? This is a team that has an MVP candidate in Elly De La Cruz. This is a team that has a lot of really young guys. Christian Encarnacion Strand, Spencer Steer, Noel V. Marte, Matt McLean. Like, this is a team that has a lot of really young and fun players already. Why not add Sasaki to that roster? I do ultimately think that Cincinnati will be chosen, over or maybe slightly outbid in whatever situation it is to this following team. And the team that I believe Sasaki will sign with in the 2025 offseason is the New York Mets. Now, why? Because the New York Mets need pitching, and they need it bad. They are a playoff caliber team, a team that could have gone all the way last year had they had better pitching depth. They just didn't have it, and so I think they are going to throw a bag that is heavy at a guy like Sasaki to bring him in and help bolster that roster. It also helps when you have a guy like Kodai Senga already on your roster to kind of help be a ambassador of sorts to the New York Mets and kind of, court Sasaki to come over and join forces. So I think that if you have all three of those guys, you have Minaya, you have Kodai Senga, and you have Roki Sasaki in your starting rotation, and then you have Peterson and some other guys as some depth pieces. I actually think this team could be really good. So I think Sasaki is going to go to the Mets. And that's it. Those are my predictions for those two free agents. Let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys think Sasaki or Soto are going to sign? Do you think I'm out of my mind? Are there any teams you think that they're going to sign to that I forgot to mention? Let me know in the comments section below.